Ferrin Open, it's Mike Stibbs.
Just make sure it sounds sexy, Stibbs.
Lord Almighty, how can you stand Arizona? Your fair skin must be burning down into your absent soul. Mike, 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 we can barely hear you. It sounds to me like you called us from inside a hole. But your phone calls lift me higher, like the ERA of Mark Pryor. Your hair looks like it's on fire. You're Mike Ferrin. You're just a hunk of burning love. You're just a hunk of burning love.
Mike Ferrin, Sirius XM MLB Network Radio, joining us live in the video stream at youtube.com.
And of course, the minute we go on, his screen freezes.
Oh, it does.
No!
He is frozen. Oh, my God.
Oh,
I saw it happen.
Oh my God!
His internet's not any better than his phone.
What's going on? It's so funny because we spent 5 minutes off the air talking. We were talking
Yeah, it was
about
fun.
baseball coming back because there is news actually that we're about to get to in a moment. So we were like having an actual conversation on all of our computers. It was working great, and then it freezes, and now he's hopping back in and out. Oh my gosh! Very on brand for Mike Ferrin. Very on brand.
Awesome.
Should we at least pop open our beers while we?
While we
we
wait
can
for
talk
Mike
about
to
those.
reconnect, we have something new.
Yeah, this is via my friend Taylor. He once lived on the East Coast in DC. He
I don't
does
know why
not.
we're all doing
does
this.
not
It's the
yeah, I
same
guess
thing.
it's the same beer. So this is Hardywood. None of this makes sense. It's a New England style double
Heard
IPA,
that.
Mosaic and El Dorado hops. I'm very excited. It sucks too. Ferrin's not in here. This is from Richmond. This is from Virginia. He used to live in that part of the country.
Oh, that's good.
Is it good?
Jeez, you guzzled that in a hurry.
Yeah, Stibbs already chugged his entire beer. It's gone. Wow. So Ferrin's just not going to be here, huh? And this sucks. We had like actual baseball stuff to discuss with him.
Maybe we should check and see if maybe they did put out a statement and he's got to go and do Sirius XM.
Yeah, there is no
Nothing.
statement.
Though
Okay.
there is, and Mike
Not
was
yet,
going
at
to
least.
tell us there is some new information out there today. Now it's not necessarily
It's like this. Meet the new information, same as the old
information.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
CC
Wow,
the
what
who.
happened? Have you haven't seen any?
He's coming in now.
Okay.
He's coming in now.
Hang on.
Technology.
Adding to stream.
Hey,
he's on his
there he
phone
is.
now.
What happened? Like, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, like, you guys were gone.
Well,
you froze.
You froze. It was. I wish I would have taken a screenshot. It was a beautiful.
Looks very
freeze
handsome.
frame. Yeah.
What happened to your
You guys
computer?
froze on my end. I don't know. Do you want to try
Do
and
you
get
have a
back in on the
PC or do you have a
computer?
Mac?
I have a Mac.
Darn it. I shouldn't have asked the question. Shouldn't have asked the
That's a
question.
long
Wait,
time
I'm
rivalry.
going to try and enter the broadcast studio on the computer. It's back up and working. Hang on.
All right,
stand by.
perfect.
We could get two different angles of me. It's like
Oh, I like
between
that.
number one, number two. Hang on.
Number one, number two.
Jeff
Number
says,
one.
There we
Mike,
go.
new AOL disc.
There we go. Hey.
And that one's gone. And technology.
Hey, Mike.
Extreme Josh baseball voice, but for technology.
Yeah, baseball.
Hey, Mike, real quick before we start talking about baseball, have you ever
Baseball.
had this beer? It's from Richmond, Virginia. Got it from my friend who used to live there. None of this makes sense. It's a double IPA.
No,
Hardy
I've not.
Brewing Company.
That's my old nape of the neck. So, but I have not had that.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, Hardywood Park Craft Brewery out of Richmond.
You down that fast.
I poured it in a glass.
Right.
I'm a beer nerd. I put it in a glass. Wanted it
He's
to
dainty. He can't
want
drink
the
out of a can.
aromas, the hops. I want everything, to release and smell nice and good.
Oh,
It
well,
makes it taste better.
I'm sure it's great.
It is.
So as we were teasing just before you came back on, there is some new information today. Apparently, the Wall Street Journal has something new.
Yeah.
Fill us in on what this is.
Jared Diamond's reporting that MLB is thinking about going back to the Players Association and saying, that bubble idea that we had a few months ago, maybe we want to reconsider that because there are obviously, I think it's something like the states that house half of the teams in Major League Baseball are seeing increases in COVID cases. And just as of today, the Phillies and the Blue Jays had players that tested positive. The Phillies had 8 different people at their Clearwater facility, which is their spring training home in Florida. The Jays, just yesterday, were talking about, maybe if we can't play in Toronto because there's still quarantine restrictions for people who come across the border into Ontario, we could use our Dunedin facility. Well, now they've shut that down to be able to test. And that's on top of the Tampa Bay Lightning having a number of players in that same region that tested positive today. I think they had something like 11 as they're in phase 2 of the NHL comeback plan. So the virus, as much as we're frustrated by the negotiations between Major League Baseball and the Players Association, the virus has now reminded us that they are the main enemy in this.
Yeah, Mike, I was going to ask you about that at like the very end of this conversation, because of course the monetary stuff has been what we have has been dominating conversation for like a month and a half. But you look at the NBA's plan and how so much of it is focused on the coronavirus. And I was wondering this morning, what type of conversations are being had right now inside of baseball about the same thing? Because most of it seems to be in relation to the contracts and to how much money players will get.
Well, remember the first thing when they started negotiating this that they put together was a 67-page document that MLB sent to the Players Association, and they gave the MLB and teams about 10 days to put everything together to issue comments. And there's been discussion on that, and I have not heard that they have approved the final protocol, but they're close enough that it's not an issue. So they have something in place. It's about half the size of what the NBA's was. And obviously it doesn't deal with a bubble situation because, teams are talking about playing in their home ballpark still. And we're talking about like, if everything gets done this weekend, we're talking about like the last week in July, like we had a month until this gets going. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's anything that's changed in the last, 12 hours, certainly, but boy, it does feel a little bit like the middle of March again, right? When you see all of these players testing positive, you see the COVID cases really on the rise. We were talking before we came on about how in Arizona today, it was 20% of the COVID tests were positive. I mean, we're seeing one of the highest rates in the country, Texas, Florida as well. So it's, I don't know what their plan is. I don't know how concerned they are about it in the end, but it's something that certainly is at least should be in the public consciousness in terms of raising its head. Just wear a mask, please.
But if they, yes, please
just wear a mask.
In fact, I'll just put mine on right now. But
it looks so much better.
It does. I know. But is the bubble plan going back to those same states?
No, it looks like Southern California is what they're considering, which would have seemed unfathomable 3 months ago. But the safest places right now, the safest place is probably New York, which has 2 major league stadiums and a number of minor league facilities that are around there.
Here, we're okay. You can play at TD Ameritrade.
Could
on there now.
There's literally nothing going on there now. We should be in the middle of
hopefully the last day before the championship series.
Yeah, game 1 of the regular Friday doubleheader. We should be towards the end, but
right?
We're not.
I mean, it's just like I don't know. I mean, I think this is new. This is something that I hadn't heard until this afternoon, until Jared Diamond reported it, and so I don't know what's going to happen because in the midst of this, the players and owners are still arguing over money, which we always felt like was going to be the bigger impediment to getting back on the field, which seems counterintuitive based on the fact that we're in the midst of, I don't know if you've heard, but we're in the midst of a pandemic.
What? No,
I know. It's shocking.
The thing I can't get over is we're 10 games apart and basically the average cost per team in terms of the money difference would be the equivalent of what the Cubs paid Brandon Morrow last year, not to pitch. It's about $9 to $10 million.
You could. That's actually not true. That would be if we were to split the difference between the two. That would be what it would be with what it is now.
Right.
The difference in plans is about $250 million, and it's actually a little bit more than that because in the counter proposal that the Players Association made yesterday, they asked for bigger guarantees both on this postseason and on next year's postseason. If they expand the playoffs, they won't be selling extra TV rights to it this year. They'll just be trying to recoup as much of the money that they lost this season. But for next year, they would sell more. And generally, the players' cut of the postseason comes from the gate. Last year was about $80 million total. It was like 50% of the wild card game, and it's 60% of a certain number of games in each of the subsequent rounds, like the guaranteed games in each round. So I think that's there. It's actually not that. It's more like it's on average a little bit more than that per team. But the problem with that is that it doesn't work like that. I mean, the Yankees obviously have a significantly different payroll than what the Marlins do. And you have to remember that as part of this, revenue sharing was suspended for this year. So generally what happens is that all of the local baseball revenue goes into a pot, and 48% of it ends up going and being allocated from the teams in the biggest markets to the smallest markets. And it's supposed to go towards player payroll. That doesn't exist this year. So, and that's not to say that every small market team is the one that's in trouble in terms of where their finances are. There are some bigger market ones that are too. But listen, the losses are very real, and as are the concerns of the players as to whether or not they should be paid the wage that they negotiated to. So I mean, there are serious issues that are on both sides, and it's probably one of the major reasons why this has taken so long to try and hammer out. It's so distasteful because it's happened publicly in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah, Mike, along those lines, what did you make of this week? Because there were some days where it was like, whoa, this is really positive. And then there were others where it was like, okay, never mind. Nobody is even talking to each other. Did the owners, did they misread things, or were they trying to posture themselves publicly, you think, with some of the positive stuff like on Monday and Tuesday?
No, I don't think it's posturing. I mean, I think what's much more, so let's kind of look back and take what's a most likely reading of what happened. In March, when they made the agreement, the players agreed to allow the commissioner to set the schedule if they were given a prorated salary based on the number of games played. So instead of getting, if you're going to make $20 million over 160 games, if you're going to play 80, you're going to get half of that, right? So that's where most of this came from. Well, the owners wanted to try and renegotiate that portion of it because their losses are significant. It seems incredible, but in March, when they made that agreement, nobody thought, neither the players nor the owners thought that they would be playing this season without fans. And yet the way that agreement was written, the economic feasibility clause, from my understanding, is separate from what was agreed to with prorated pay. So basically what the owners were trying to do was to get the players to reopen that agreement to take a more significant pay cut to try and put more games on the field. And the players didn't feel like they needed to do that because they'd already accepted what was going to be, in this case now, almost a 60% pay cut, even if they were to take the owner's last stand. So all of that has to go into it. And that's where last weekend you got the stuff about, tell us when and where, and the threats from the union of filing a grievance. And they probably had some pretty good grounds because they were negotiating. They were basically trying to negotiate a new agreement to replace the current one. Well, as soon as the owners went into the current agreement and agreed to prorated pay and tried to set a number of games with it and all of these other things that needed to be bargained, they got back onto the same page. The problem is that the owners really have not budged over what the total compensation would look like. It's going to look like about, give or take $1.5 billion of the 4.1 that generally goes to players is what they're willing to give up to the players for the season. They don't know if they're going to be able to play a postseason, which is where the owners get a significant amount of money. And that money generally goes to the players anyway, just in the forms of salary, not in the term in what you get in playoff shares. So all of that had to factor into it. And I think part of what happened was when Tony Clark said that we were going to make a counter proposal, Rob Manfred said, listen, you can do that, but we don't have enough days on the calendar. We're not pushing things later. They are concerned about the coronavirus, but also their television partners would prefer them to play the postseason in October because that's when they have it scheduled. That's when they feel like they get the most bang for their buck. They build everything around that. So all of those things were factors. And so coming back at 70 games may have been a misread of the room. And what's really frustrating about it is that, you had two guys in a room having a conversation for 5 hours on Tuesday, and Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, and Tony Clark, the head of the Players Association, and neither of them can even agree on what they talked about, on whether they agreed to a framework or whether they agreed to an agreement, which is what the owners thought, whether it was just a proposal, which is what the union thought. And I think that this speaks to, I think there are a couple things. One, neither of them have been particularly good at communicating with one another or with the public. And this is not the first time that it's happened with either one of them. And I think that that's one of the most frustrating aspects of that is that this lack of communication is a huge, huge issue. And I think, too, the fact that you've seen so many public leaks speaks to the amount of respect that there is for leadership on either side. You're not able to keep it quiet. As much as everybody likes to talk about the NBA being a partnership between the league and the players, it's not true. That's marketing. There's never actually a partnership there. You have bosses. You don't have a partnership with your bosses at the radio station, right? As good as they may be to you, and I'm sure that they're the best bosses in a million infinite universes.
They're perfect,
just like mine are. I love all my bosses. When push comes to shove, they're going to protect their interests, right? Yeah. And so that's one of the issues that they have, but they aren't even able to get on the same page to get along. And that, to me, as somebody who covers the sport, is incredibly frustrating. I can only imagine how irritating it is to fans.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, right now, it seems like, unlike a lot of other times in history where we've had labor disputes, where eventually fans come around and they start to take the side of the owners, it seems like, just gauging by my Twitter feed and just how I've seen reaction, that the players are getting most of the love in this right now. What to you is the strongest argument that the owners have? Because to me, it's, we want to keep this on time. We want to make sure that we're done in October because we want to avoid, a second wave. We want to, as you mentioned, have our TV partners satisfied playing the games in October. But is there anything else that is the strongest argument the ownership has right now?
I mean, I think that would be the right thing to do, is to take the ground on that, right? I mean, but they have had enough other discussions that have gone on in this that have been financially motivated, and discussion of, what the next collective bargaining agreement will look like, which, by the way, is over in December of 2021 and right around the corner. And it's going to be, it looks like it's going to be a really brutal fight for that I don't know that there's anything that you can necessarily say in that. I mean, I will say this, like, for all of the just pay the players, just go and pay them, just pay your employees, just do all this, they are losing hundreds of millions of dollars. That's indisputable. They are losing a ton of money this year. And the value of their franchises are not necessarily something they can borrow against. The Sports Business Journal just reported last week that no sports franchise is having an easy time borrowing money against the value of their current franchise based on the current state of the economy. And so it is a really tough spot. Not that we should feel sorry for people who have deep enough pockets to potentially withstand something like this, but I think it is a very real concern. I like to deal in reality as much as possible. So while we're dealing with money on both sides, that to me is the biggest issue. What should be the biggest issue is there is this freaking virus that has killed more than 19,000 Americans at this point, that more than 2 million people have had, that's prevalent in the states where half of the Major League Baseball teams are housed. And those are the places that you're planning on playing your regular season games. That should be the only discussion at this point, but there is just a significant level of tone deafness on both sides from that, and maybe it's because they just don't think it ends up impacting them. That could be it. I mean, when you're young, you feel like you're invincible, and most players are young, and I'm sure that they feel like, I'll be fine. We don't know that. And if you're an owner, you probably have found a way to keep yourself fairly sheltered. Most of the guys, the average age of the people that represent major league teams in ownership is over 66. And my guess is that they've been extremely cautious because they're at the highest risk for this. So I'm not sure that there's necessarily, I don't know what the feelings are from both sides, but that's really where the focus should be. And unfortunately, the last 6 weeks, it hasn't been.
So, Mike, along the lines of the virus, I remember we had you on in either late March or early April. And one of the questions that I had for you then was, when you announce a time frame, how long do you need to get the pitcher's arms ready in particular? Mm-hmm. Okay, so how fast is the turnaround right now because of the virus? We've been plateauing for a month and a half, 2 months in terms of just the overall deaths per day. And you mentioned it at the outset of the conversation that the numbers are climbing, in a variety of spots around the country, including where you live in Arizona. I don't know, man. I've just gotten so much more pessimistic about things this week, and now I almost wonder if even if they figure out the dollars and cents part about it, what about the actual virus itself? Can they turn it around as fast as they'd like to?
Yeah. So I mean, like if they end up with an agreement, and my guess is that by Monday or Tuesday they do issue some sort of awareness on how many games there are. We're talking about spring training basically starting no later than a week from today. And then we're talking about games starting somewhere between the 19th and 26th of July, I would guess, based on, it depends on how many games are on the schedule. But that's what we're looking at. So that would be the turnaround time. I mean, most guys have been working out. They've been told for more than a month now, or almost a month now, to be, hey, get ready, get ready, get ready. It's going to happen at some point. And so guys have been ramping up. So they have been having their own kind of spring trainings on their own. Now they need to get back together as teams, and then we'll see what happens. I mean, that's the best I can give you right now, because again, like anything that the virus decides to stop, it's going to stop. But the other part of it is that we don't know how we're going to react to it. We don't know what's going to happen. If you have 3 or 4 players test positive on a team, they may just put them on a COVID injured list, move them aside, and bring in players off the taxi squad and the expanded roster, or guys that are on the 40-man roster like you would with an injury during the course of a season, to just replace them. Because teams aren't just bringing back their set roster. They're going to bring back about twice as many players to be able to have basically a reserve squad available, because there is not likely to be a minor league season, even though nothing has been announced.
Yeah, how big is the taxi squad? I mean, are we just talking look at the 40-man roster and go from there? Do you go beyond that? Have they decided on anything?
Yeah, my understanding is what's been talked about is about 60 players. So you would have the 40-man roster and probably about another 20. Some of them will be prospects that you want to get work for. Some of it will be veteran major leaguers who would have been in camp on a minor league deal, or kind of AAA backups, depth guys. But that's my understanding. And then what would happen is that you would have kind of a phased-in roster. The first couple weeks of the season would probably be a 30-man active, then 28, then down to 26. For the last month or 6 weeks of the season, or whatever it would be, similar to what you would have over the course of a regular year. But you would only be traveling about 30 guys total, 30 to 35 guys total at any given time, and then the rest would be working out at your home ballpark when the team's on the road, or playing scrimmages against one another. I don't know if it's at college or earlier in the day or whatever.
Yeah,
a lot of simulated games.
How do you stay in game shape, and how do guys, where are they going to be? Because normally, you call up a guy from AAA. If you're the Cubs, you're calling them from Des Moines, or if you're the Storm Chasers or the Royals, you're calling them from Omaha.
Right.
So is everyone based then in the same city?
Yeah, everyone will be based at the major league ballpark. Or in the case of, the Diamondbacks are fortunate in that their spring training stadium is 20 miles away from their home ballpark. I think theoretically the Marlins could do the same thing. Jupiter's about a 45-minute hour drive from Miami, so they could have the taxi squad be there. So that, for the most part, though, it would be just they would be playing simulated games just to try and stay fresh, keep their work in if they were called upon.
Mike, I don't want to do the thing where I ask you, hey, what do you think is going to happen, this or this?
I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is a smarter idea, playing in all the stadiums or doing a bubble thing?
I was laughed at for this, but I always thought the best thing to do was to play in a bubble situation, because I think it's the best thing you can control. And I think it was the thing that, Dr. Anthony Fauci wrote off on right away. And you'll notice has brought back up again this week with the NFL, because it's the best chance to ensure that everybody is as safe as possible. And I think it's a big reason why the NBA has done it. Now, when we were looking at this in April, when this was first being, floated as one of the ideas, we were also thinking, oh my gosh, we could have 120 games. The guys are going to be away with their family from 5 months. I don't know that makes sense. The problem is that the number of places where you can reasonably do that too is pretty minimal. I mean, like Arizona is a great place for it, because you've got 14 or 15 ballparks that you can use. But again, we just went over the COVID rates are skyrocketing here. It maybe isn't the safest spot to do. So personally, I have always been in favor of the bubble idea. I think it's the safest way to do it. That said, I mean, if everybody is going to take this seriously and they are just going to go from hotel to ballpark to plane, back to home, not going out, making sure that their family is safe, getting testing for themselves and their families regularly, it should be relatively okay, assuming they're not going clubbing in Scottsdale, which is, I think, the reason why we've seen, a significant outbreak here.
Yeah, and it's crazy because all of this is coming, and now we're getting different positive tests. And you mentioned the numbers in Arizona, and everything has just gone nuts here in the last 12 hours. It seems like I don't know. I don't know where things are going to stand right now.
I don't either. I mean, it's really tough to try and figure.
Wanted, and that's an announcement, and then find out that we can't play in Chicago because of
the first place.
We can't. Yeah. As I use the analogy, the reason why this car stopped in the first place was because of the COVID.
Right.
The reason why the car hasn't been getting started is because the two sides are haggling over the price of gas.
So let's play out a game where the worst case scenario happens and the virus decides that we're not going to have a baseball season. The best thing that Major League Baseball and the Players Association could do then is to lock themselves in virtual rooms, or maybe sometimes 6 feet apart in other rooms, or maybe sit outside if the weather's nice someplace, 6 feet apart, and hammer out the issues that they have to fix the next collective bargaining agreement.
Yes.
I mean, I think we're already treating this as a work stoppage, and it's like you get a one work stoppage out of jail free card, right? Like one get out of jail free card, and so you kind of have it. And the fight that's coming in 2021 is going to be far more significant because we've already heard a couple of owners talk about the idea of a revenue split with the players, which is similar to what they have in all of the other leagues, but those are all capped leagues, and that's something that the union has fought. Caps and floors for salaries don't necessarily lead to parity, but they do lead to more cost certainty for owners. And one of the biggest issues is that there's a big dispute over what actually constitutes baseball income. Like to use the Cubs as an example, do the restaurants around Wrigley constitute it? Do the apartment buildings? Because if those are owned by the Ricketts and by the Cubs, is it or not? Now, I tend to think if you're investing in real estate around the ballpark, that's not part of your baseball-related income. But there are many agents and in the Players Association that disagree with that and think that that's part of the revenue that should be split up because you're benefiting from having it there. That's just from the owner's side. From the player's side, they have to find a way to get more money into the hands of younger players sooner, enough that helps them to not necessarily to at least think twice about signing long-term extensions before they hit free agency. They need to find a less contentious path for those who are arbitration eligible while also reducing the number of non-tender candidates so that the free agent market isn't flooded, because one of the reasons why free agency has struggled in baseball is because teams aren't willing to pay for the average major league player anymore, because there are so many that end up on the market together, and you might be able to fill that in with two basically with a platoon for a lot cheaper. So you have to do that all while also protecting free agency. I mean, they're dealing with a lot of stuff here. And all of that is stuff that the union has to figure out first and then bring to Major League Baseball, and then work with MLB and the owners on trying to basically create a new economic system. Because if you just go back into it with the same thing, we're going to hear the same complaints next year. I mean, what's the definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Things have changed, and the union is going to need to adapt. And if they don't, we're going to hear them complaining about this in the next CBA as well. And it's going to fall on deaf ears. I mean, listen, I don't want to make it sound like I'm pro-owner or pro-union. I try to play it as down the middle as I can. But, man, a lot of the complaints from the Players Association I have really been bothered by over the course of the last 4 years because they agreed to the damn deal. They decided that what they wanted were quality of life assurances versus trying to battle for more economic gain for the players. They made a huge mistake in what they conceded on, and now they're upset about that. But they made their own bed in this regard, and you always have to be fighting for. It's not like the owners were going to go, no, that's fine. We'll go back and you're right, it's inequitable. We'll go back and fix it. That's not the way it works. It's not the way it works in any walk of life. Nope. So there's a lot that has to go into this, and
baseball,
it's going to be bad. Yeah. Dude, I got a text from a buddy. I got a text from a buddy today that said, I really enjoyed Pessimism Alley this morning.
What's the besides the what is it? The Mrs. Lincoln.
Yeah. How do you enjoy the play?
Yeah. Besides that, how was the play? Yeah. God. Yeah. Next year's going to be hell. It seems the whole CBA, like that's going to be miserable.
Yeah. Cause it's going to hang over the whole season.
Yeah. And they're going to have debates about like, okay, whatever happens with this season, whether we get games or not, the owners are gonna try to make some arguments, right, about making more money next year and about the players maybe giving up something. Do you think that's gonna happen?
I mean, so they're not gonna. I would not say that. I think one of the things that has led the owners to try and be as frugal as they have been, and what the offers have been, is that they are concerned about 2021 because they are likely to have a pretty regular schedule, albeit one that may not have fans in the stands. And so I don't know that they're necessarily going to be able to go through this whole rigmarole again. I mean, you notice that in these proposals, they've discussed putting advertising on uniforms. I think for this year, it would be to try and make good on some of the sales the corporate sales that they've already had, just to try and keep some of that money for next year. It would be try and raise funds, the extra playoff rounds. That would be part of that as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's big concern, but I think what ends up happening is it's going to affect the players that are free agents that don't have guaranteed contracts. And what you're likely to see is a huge number of non-tenders, a huge number of even reasonable options on contracts that aren't picked up, and a pretty soft free agent market for anybody who's not named like Mookie Betts and JT Realmuto. I mean, like, those guys are still going to get paid. The stars always get paid.
Yeah.
It's the rest of them that are really going to struggle. And I think that that's the way that the owners will try and recoup some of it, is that you'll see some serious payroll slashing. And there's not really a whole lot you can complain about if they haven't. I mean, if this had happened at the same time that the NBA and the NHL had it, I don't think it'd be nearly as big an issue. But there are $0 of revenue that are coming in. And that's where the issue is. And I do think it is instructive to watch this and watch what happens with the NFL. And I realize it's a capped league and it's a revenue share league, and that might push it another year, but I would not be surprised because they still, even as much as it's a TV league and the national TV contracts, my understanding is they still get about 38% of the revenue from game day. They think they're going to be playing in front of full stadiums with fans in it. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I hope 3 months from now, things are a lot different. I will happily sacrifice a baseball season for us to get back to normal in 3 months. But if you buy that, I've got some property in Yuma that's oceanfront soon, someday, that I really would like to unload if you're interested.
Well,
I am interested, Mike. So I'll talk to you offline about that.
I love the beach.
Yeah,
there's a lot of beach in Yuma. A lot of beach.
A lot of beach. No water. A lot of beach, though.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, we'll cross our fingers for, a lot of different reasons.
This is the most uplifting conversation we've ever had.
Mike, I feel
so
like
glad we had you on.
I feel like it's March again. I feel like we're doing the same thing we did in March.
I do feel I'm a little worried about that. Yeah. Because, I mean, it's like, what was the tipping point? Was Rudy Gobert, right? Yep. With the NBA and Tom Hanks, right? Yep. So,
same night.
I mean, like, if Tom Hanks tests positive again, I think we're really in trouble then. But I don't know what that moment is. I mean, it does feel like we're getting close to a tipping point. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what stops it. We seem to have better ideas of how this virus transmits and how we can prevent it by wearing a mask. And even if we don't think we have it, I mean, just be kind to your neighbor and do it. That's to me, that's the American way.
Very easy.
That
makes too much sense.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop it entirely, and that's the other part of it is we're doing our best to deal with whatever we can. And I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know that we're going to okay, well, this is the peak and it's going to go down from here. Who knows? Maybe it keeps going. I don't know. Nobody knows. Doctors don't know. None of us know. We're very helpless right now.
Yeah.
Well, stay safe and healthy, and
you too.
And thanks for joining us. And we missed you this year. Of course, you haven't been to the CWS for a while because you got
no. I know. I miss Omaha so much. I miss the College World Series.
See, this was the year to have the CWS. Ferrin could have joined us.
Yeah, dude. By the way, get this: it didn't rain until yesterday. So there would have been a delay, but the first delay wouldn't have happened until Thursday.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And we had nice weather too, so it kind of sucked.
Yeah, it's 80 degrees out right now. It's perfect.
It's a little cooler there than it is here. I'm gonna go get in the pool.
Just a skosh. All right. Thanks, Mike. Take care.
Later, Mike.
See you guys.
There he is, Mike Ferrin, Sirius XM MLB Radio on the Diamondbacks Radio Network. Got to take a break. We got predictions and what you say, so we'll do all that. That segment brought to you by Spirit World. You can find a lot of delicious beers like the one we're having right now.
Oh, it's tasty.
At Spirit World. Thank you for being a good friend of 1620 The Zone.